All right, so you're thinking about getting that new iPhone 16e.
Uh-huh.
Want to cut through all the hype. We're going to do exactly that. We're breaking down this really in-depth review
Uh-huh.
from TechWise Corner. I think they're a pretty popular tech blog. We go into like all the nitty-gritty, the design, the display, how this thing actually performs, the new camera everyone's going crazy over, battery life, even the software. So are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it. I think it's always so interesting to see what reviewers pick out,
Yeah.
especially with Apple. I mean, they are just marketing geniuses, so you really got to separate like what's real and what's just spin.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, okay, first up, this review dives into the design. And I got to say, they get a little carried away with the language.
Yeah.
They call it like a master class in modern smartphone engineering.
Mm.
But what does that actually like mean for the average person?
Well, they point out that Apple's really focusing on the details, even the little things, like how the buttons line up perfectly and how that camera module just blends right in. They even mention this sleek black finish and like the minimalist shape of the phone. I think they're going for that classic Apple aesthetic, but with like even more refinement this time and higher quality materials.
So it's not just about looks then. They're saying it's built to actually last.
Yeah, that's the vibe I get. And, that focus on longevity is kind of interesting. When you think about how we're constantly bombarded with new gadgets, it's like maybe Apple's saying, hey, we're making a phone that'll still feel relevant in a few years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
They also highlight how comfortable it is to hold, even for long periods of time, which I think anyone who spends way too much time on their phone can definitely appreciate.
Totally. If you think about how much we rely on these things, right? For work, for staying connected, for entertainment, having a phone that's actually comfortable to use, for hours on end, I mean, that can really make a difference. It's not just a luxury anymore. It's a real design feature, one that impacts your whole experience with the phone.
Okay, next up, that Super Retina XDR display. This review really goes all out. They say it's like a portal to an immersive visual experience with vibrant colors, deep blacks, and an extraordinary level of detail.
Oh, wow.
It sounds like they're impressed. But
Are they?
what does all that actually mean?
So it sounds like they're impressed, but let's unpack that a little. I think they're emphasizing the display's ability to go beyond just being bright or sharp, right? When they use terms like immersive and extraordinary detail, they're focusing on how well this display can reproduce colors and contrasts, how accurately it reflects what you'd see in real life.
Yeah, and they mention high resolution for like super crisp detail and adaptive brightness so you can actually see the screen outdoors. That's got to be a big deal for a lot of people, right?
It is. I mean, think about how frustrating it is when you're trying to see your phone in direct sunlight. Adaptive brightness just takes care of that. It adjusts the screen's brightness based on the ambient light, makes the phone way more usable outdoors.
Okay, yeah, I'm sold on that one. They also talk about how this amazing display really impacts everything you do on the phone, like watching movies, editing photos, even just browsing the web. They make it pretty clear this screen changes the game.
Right, and that's really the key here. They're taking those technical specs, like resolution and adaptive brightness and whatever, and connecting them to the things you actually do with your phone. So you can really understand how all that tech translates into a better experience for you.
All right, let's get into like the brains of this operation. The A18 chip. I feel like every new phone boasts about having this powerful new chip, but what makes this one stand out?
Yeah, I know. Everyone's always saying their chip is the most powerful. But the question is, how does that actually play out in real life, right? What's interesting here is that the review doesn't just focus on raw power. They're talking about how this A18 chip balances power with efficiency.
So it can handle those demanding tasks,
Yeah,
but without killing your battery in like an hour.
that's the idea. It's about hitting that sweet spot. You get the performance you need for things like gaming or editing video, but you're not constantly tethered to a charger.
They also mentioned the chip's real-time machine learning capabilities, which sounds pretty futuristic. They say this leads to a smarter, more responsive device. Can you break that down for me a little?
Absolutely. Imagine if your phone could actually learn your habits
Yeah.
and anticipate your needs before you even know them. That's the power of real-time machine learning. This chip is constantly analyzing how you use the phone and adapting to give you a more personalized experience.
So it's like the phone gets to know you over time and becomes more intuitive the more you use it.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving away from the idea of the phone as this static thing. It's becoming more like a partner that evolves with you. And this A18 chip seems to be a big step in that direction.
Okay, so whether you're someone who's multitasking like crazy,
Mhm.
or you're playing these graphics-intensive games, or you just use a lot of demanding apps, this A18 chip is designed to keep up. And without sacrificing battery life. That's pretty impressive.
It is. Now let's talk about that camera, the 48MP Fusion camera. This review calls it a total game changer because it combines data from multiple sensors. But what does that actually mean for, like, your photos?
Okay, so they say it's not just about having more megapixels. It's about how this fusion technology captures way more detail and color.
Right. And they don't just like throw around jargon. They give specific examples, like how much better landscapes and portraits look with this camera. Think about a photo you took where like the details get lost in the shadows or the colors look kind of washed out. This fusion technology is supposed to fix those problems and give you a much more realistic image.
Yeah, that makes sense. They also highlight the improvements to night mode and just the phone's overall image processing, which are features a lot of people really care about.
Oh, for sure. Low light photography is where smartphone cameras used to struggle. But it sounds like Apple's put a lot of work into using software to like overcome those limitations, so you're more likely to get a clear, usable shot, even when the lighting isn't great.
And they mentioned 4K video recording too,
Yeah.
which is awesome for anyone who wants that really smooth cinematic look.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to appeal to a lot of different users, from casual photographers who just want good, everyday pictures,
Right.
to people who are more serious about photography and video. They're saying this camera can handle it all.
All right, let's move on to a topic that's very important to me, battery life. This review actually goes beyond that usual all-day battery life claim and digs into how Apple's approaching power management differently.
Yeah, I think we've all become kind of skeptical of those vague battery claims. I mean, it's one thing to say it lasts all day, but it's another to actually explain how they achieve that, especially with how much we use our phones these days.
Totally. They specifically talk about how the iPhone 16e can handle streaming, video calls, even those really power-hungry apps. And it
Yeah.
won't just die on year.
Right. You know, it's funny, we've gotten so used to worrying about our phones dying, it's like we've just accepted it as normal. But with these advances in battery tech and power management, maybe we're finally getting to a point where battery anxiety is a thing of the past.
Ah, that would be amazing. And of course, they do mention fast charging
Right.
because let's face it, sometimes you need to power up quickly.
Oh, yeah. Fast charging is essential these days. Our phones are such a big part of our lives that even a little bit of downtime can feel like a huge disruption. So being able to charge quickly, that can really minimize that disruption and keep us connected.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the software. The review goes into the whole iOS experience, highlighting how intuitive and feature-rich it is. But they go beyond just the basics. They get into something pretty interesting, the integration with Apple's ecosystem.
Yeah, that's what really stood out to me too. It's not just about iOS 17 itself. It's about how seamlessly it works with all the other stuff, like iCloud, the App Store, your other Apple devices.
So if you're already using a bunch of Apple products, this phone will just feel like a natural part of that.
Exactly. And that can be a huge plus in terms of convenience and just having a smooth user experience. But it also raises some questions, like what if you want to switch to a different platform later on? That level of integration could make it harder to leave the Apple world.
That's a really good point. It's something to consider if you're not already fully committed to Apple. You're kind of weighing the convenience against that potential lack of flexibility.
Right, and it goes beyond just devices. They talk about how Apple Intelligence is built right into the software, so the phone is actually learning your daily routines and trying to anticipate your needs.
So it's like having a personal assistant who knows you really well
Yeah.
and is always there to offer suggestions and make your life easier.
Mhm.
But I can see how some people might find that a little creepy.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a fine line between personalization and intrusion. It all comes down to how much control you have over the data the phone collects and how it's using that information. But it definitely shows where things are going, towards this more personalized and predictive technology.
And speaking of personalization, they touch on how iOS 17 handles privacy. It sounds like Apple's really emphasizing user control and transparency when it comes to data collection.
That's good to hear. I mean, as our devices become more integrated into our lives and collect more and more information about us, it's crucial to have clear guidelines and controls to protect our privacy. So it's encouraging to see Apple taking this seriously.
Okay, last but not least, the review covers connectivity and some of those extra features. That can really make a difference. They mention 5G support, which honestly is pretty much expected these days.
Yeah, it's becoming the standard. But it's still worth thinking about how each phone implements 5G. Is it just about faster downloads? Or are there other benefits? They actually point out some cool use cases for the iPhone 16, like how 5G makes streaming for video calls and online gaming way smoother. So it's not just about speed, it's about how that speed actually improves your experience.
I hadn't thought about it like that. They also mentioned things like Face ID for security and an upgraded sound system. It seems like they're paying attention to those little details. That can really enhance the overall experience.
Yeah, totally. Those smaller features might not be as flashy as a new
Mm.
camera or a faster processor, but they can make a huge difference in how you use the phone every day. It's about creating a device that's not just powerful, but also enjoyable to use.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot. That sleek design, the impressive Super Retina XDR display, the power of the A18 chip, what that new camera system can do, those improvements to battery life and the software. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And I think this TechWise Corner review does a pretty good job of explaining all those technical details.
Mhm.
But, beyond the specs, I think what's really interesting is what this phone tells us about the bigger picture, like the future of smartphones and their role in our lives.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. What does the iPhone 16e signal about where we're headed?
Well, a few things come to mind. First, the whole machine learning and AI thing. It's taking personalization to a whole new level. It's like the phone is becoming less of a tool and more of an intelligent companion. It adapts to your needs and tries to anticipate what you'll do next.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, know thyself. Except now your phone is trying to know you better than you know yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be super helpful. But it also makes you think about privacy and control. Like, how much are we willing to let our devices know about us? And what happens to all that data? These are questions we need to keep asking as this technology keeps developing.
That's a really important point. It's not just about all the cool features. It's about how this stuff could impact our lives and our relationship with technology.
Definitely. Another thing that stands out is the focus on ecosystem integration. This iPhone 16 is clearly designed to be part of that larger Apple ecosystem, working smoothly with your other Apple devices and services.
So it sounds like if you're already using a bunch of Apple products, this phone will just fit right in.
Exactly. And that can be a huge plus for convenience and user experience.
Mm.
But as we talked about earlier, it also brings up that question of vendor lock-in. If you're really embedded in the Apple world, it might be harder to switch to something else later on.
Yeah, it's all about those trade-offs. Convenience versus flexibility.
Exactly. And lastly, I think the iPhone 16 shows us that smartphones are just becoming more and more powerful and sophisticated. They're not just for communication anymore. They're becoming the center of our digital lives.
That's so true. We use them for everything. Work, entertainment, banking, health tracking. It's almost like they're becoming extensions of ourselves.
Right. And that's both exciting and a little scary. We have to be aware of how this technology is shaping us and make conscious choices about how we use it.
So as you're deciding if this iPhone 16 is the right phone for you, think beyond the specs and the features. Think about what it says about where we're going, towards this more personalized, integrated, and powerful tech. How do you feel about that? How are you going to navigate this changing landscape? Those are the questions I hope you'll keep exploring. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.